إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, we have come to the next century of the era of the Banul Abbas. It's called in English the Abbasids. I want to make sure that we give things a thorough treatment today because there is a lot to go through, and inshallah we're actually a little bit ahead. So we've got just a little bit more than a century to cover today, and hopefully Allah will give us the fortitude and facilitate us with the firasa to do so, inshallah. We start with a review on the Abbasid Khulafa from our last materials because I didn't mention the 19th through the 23rd Khulafa, and that was a oversight on my part. That's a mistake on my part. The Abbasid Khulafa during this time included the 19th in the chain, Al-Qahir Billah. He reigned from 320 to 322 AH. He's the son of Mu'tadid. And after his time came the 20th Abbasid ruler, Al-Radi. He reigned from 322 to 329 AH. He's the son of Al-Qahir and the persecutor of Imam al-Barbahari and his Jama'ah. After Al-Radi came his son, the 21st Khalifa, Al-Muttaqi. He reigned from 329 to 334 AH. After Al-Muttaqi was removed and deposed by the Turkish general Tuzun, the 22nd Abbasid ruler was Al-Mustakfi, and he reigned from 334 to 336 AH. After him came the 23rd Khalifa Al-Muti', and he reigned from 336 to 363. And it is in his reign that we find ourselves today. The reason for my quoting this as an overview is to make sure that you have the silsila in place to understand which khulafa were ruling, what was happening during their time, and how that was connected to the events of the time. Because some of these khulafa were more tyrannical than others, and also you will have times where people may ask you a question outside of the class and say, well, what part have you reached now? We've reached a year such and such. Well, who was the Khalifa during that time? What was happening during that time? I want to make sure, inshallah, that you're as ready as you can be. During this time, the Abbasids suffered several military setbacks, and Abbasid power began to wane. In North Africa, their strength was almost non-existent. The main groups in North Africa were the Fatimiyya. The Fatimiyya were a group of Ismaili Shia, Seveners, Saba'iyya. And they claimed descent from the household of Ali and Fatima, radiallahu anhuma. Their masajid, to this day, if someone visits Egypt or other parts of North Africa, are actually facing away from the Qibla. They're facing Karbala. And they were even considered by some 12ers to be kuffar, because they even didn't face the same Qibla. Their leaders had titles like Al-Amir bi-Ahkamillah, Al-Hakim bi-Amrillah. They had titles that suggest divinity or something near to divinity. They, being Fatimiyya, were responsible for the building of the university that we now call Al-Azhar. Originally that was a Shia university, Al-Azhar. And it was built to try to rival the major Sunni university in North Africa, Al-Qarawiyyin in Morocco. Because Al-Qarawiyyin had been built by two female Muslim scholars in Morocco. And when the Fatimiyya built Al-Qahira, or what we're calling Cairo in English, Al-Qahira was named after one of the stars in the constellation in the night sky that was very bright when the foundation stone was laid for the city. And that particular ruler, when he established that city and then had the university established in his time and later on rulers that expanded it, Al-Azhar was a Ismaili Twelver University. It would be in Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi's time that it would finally be consolidated as a Sunni university. That's about 900 years ago. Prior to that time, Al-Azhar was strictly a Shia university for Mu'tazila creed. And the Mu'tazila that were alive at that time, although they may not have been Shia, went and studied at Al-Azhar. And now today you can see that the Mu'tazila again at Al-Azhar have gained the upper hand. You have Mahmoud Shaltut, who again was a Hanafi Mu'tazila. They gained the upper hand, and he pronounced the Twelver Shia to be a fifth school within Islam. And he actually brought them in from Iraq, Najaf, these other areas. He brought them in from Iran. He brought in Muhammad Jawad Shiri and said that they were all believers as long as they believed. This is the same Mahmoud Shaltut who denied Ahad Hadith, said the Prophet Isa Islam is dead, and that riba is a necessity because of governance. So he was famous for all of these positions that he held. Nasr Abu Zayd, who said the Qur'an was created, who's now a refugee in the Netherlands. He's another example of the revivification of the Mu'tazila creed. One of the teachers at Leeds University in the United Kingdom had this same creed from Iraq, one of the people who revived the Mu'tazila theology. So it seems as if Al-Azhar is swinging back in the direction of the Mu'tazila again. And if you look at some of the imams who later came back to the United States, Canada, and the UK in the 60s who studied with Shaltut, you'll see that their theology is almost exactly the same as his. Not because of coincidence, because they actually sat and studied with him. Their positions on riba, their positions on the Qur'an, their positions on interfaith, their positions on the Shia. All of these things are not coincidental. It's because of who they sat with. That's one of the things that occurred. The Abbasids were Persianized by the amount of Persian culture they were affected with and the continued battles with the Persians. They had a lot of Turkish people in their court because, again, the mothers would be Turkish and the fathers would be Arabs. But they used Persian culture to hold court, so the purple robes and the incense and the huge coronations for the accession to power of new Khalifahs. These were all Persian customs that came in. Military defeats were handed to the Abbasids by the Byzantines. And then there began to be a dissolution of the Abbasids. Saif ud-Dawla, the Emir of Halab in Sham, was originally an ally, but declared independence. And so the Abbasids started to resemble a figurehead. Their governance was not any longer as wide-reaching and as overhanging as it used to be. You had now the rise of the Twelvers beginning to try to build their own state, because by this time they'd codified many of their books. Prior to this time, the Twelvers had no book that laid down their entire theology. The entire theology of the Twelvers, from beginning to end, did not exist in any book form until the Fourth Age. So their creed cannot be consistently found from the first three generations. And it's one of the biggest charges against them that they're a cult, is because their creed cannot be satisfactorily found in the early generations. Also, the 12er and 7er Shia groups solidified into separate and recognizable movements as we know them today. This also occurred during the Abbasid time. And there was a continued rise to prominence of the Andalus Khilafah that was now prosperous. And people were coming to study in Sham. And they were leaving off Baghdad. Now remember, in this time, although the Mu'tazila had been defeated and driven from power, there were still pockets. The Hanafi scholars of the East had saved the madhab from going completely into i'tizal and the Mu'tazila creed. But the Hanafis in the West, particularly in Baghdad, were still very heavily inundated with the Mu'tazila creed. The Shafi'is had a very serious problem with the Mu'tazila creed. The Malikis were, by and large, they were untouched by it because of the fact that a lot of the Malikis had left from Baghdad and gone to Andalus and North Africa, near Qarawiyyin and into Andalus. So they were able to preserve that creed, and the issue of the Mu'tazila did not reach them because those rulers in Andalus did not convert to the theology. They didn't hold it in high regard. They held to their positions. and they didn't change. Now, I mentioned as a quick review, from 327 to 341, in the year 329AH, Imam Abu Muhammad Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Khalifah al-Barbahari died. It was in a room hidden away in the house of a Muslim sister that he was found to have died. The angels ministered over him, and the Muslim sister was buried in the same place after she died as well. Imam Abu al-Qasim al-Khiraqi, who was the successor to Imam Salih al-Baghdadi, successor to his father, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, was killed in 334AH while in Damascus resisting wickedness of the leaders there. His successor was the noble Imam Ubaidullah ibn Battah. Just 1 year earlier in 333AH, Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi in South Asia cleansed the Hanafis in the area of the Mu'tazila cult and resisted it with valor along with numerous other scholars. This is the same year that Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi died. Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi wrote a commentary on the Qur'an. He wrote one of the earliest commentaries on al-Fiqh al-Akbar by Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. He wrote one of the earliest commentaries on that book. He wrote his own creed. It's about 454 pages. It's called Kitab al-Tawheed. It's most likely the earliest example that we have of what would later be classified as Hanafi creed. I'd mentioned in one of the last classes that during this time there were no Ash'aris. You only had either Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal's creed, which was the early generations, the majority of them, or people classified you as being Hanafi in your creed, if you were an Orthodox Muslim. You either had that, or you had Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal's creed. Those were the only creeds there were. The Ash'aris did not exist yet because Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari during this time was still in the Mu'tazila cult. And we explained how he left from the cult and what happened. Now in 342AH, the ruler Sayf-ud-Dawla returned from battle with the Byzantine army victorious over them. We have deaths in this year that occurred. Abu Bakr Ahmed ibn Ishaq as-Sibghi, the great Shafi'i scholar. Abu Ja'far Ahmed ibn Ubaidullah al-Astabadi. Ibrahim ibn Ahmed ibn al-Muwallad, who was the student of Al-Junayd. Al-Hasan ibn Ya'qub al-Bukhari, who narrated from Abu Hatim al-Razi. Abu Muhammad Abdullah ibn Shawdhab al-Wasiti, who was a hadith scholar of al-Wasit. Abu Muhammad Hamdani. Abu al-Qasim Ali ibn Muhammad, student in the Hanafi school with some leanings towards the Mu'tazila and astrology. We also have Abu Abbas as-Sayyari of Marwa and Abu al-Hussein al-Aswari and Muhammad ibn Dawood al-Naysaburi. Now this is a very important point that I want to mention at this juncture. This particular student of Al-Junayd, Ibrahim ibn Ahmed ibn al-Muwallad, was a student of Al-Junayd al-Baghdadi, the great Imam, the great Muhsin, the great Abid, the great Zahid. During this time, they tried to impose the principles of sobriety on people who were claiming that they belonged to the people of the Muhsinin, or what were called the Mutasawwifa, or the Sufis of that time, because there started to enter in people who claimed that they had ecstatic trances. They said that whenever they heard the Qur'an being recited, that they fainted, and they said many things like this. And when they brought it to Al-Junayd, he said, "What are they saying?" And one of the people said, there are people that claim that they love Allah so much and they're in such a state of wejd that when they hear the speech of Allah, the Qur'an, they faint. He said, put them on the roof of a house near the edge and recite the Qur'an. And if they still faint and fall off, they're telling the truth. If they don't, they are liars and they have no light in them. So Al-Junayd al-Baghdadi's principle was sabr wa samaha, patience and sobriety, which is what he had learned through the masters before him. And you go back to Al-Hasan al-Basri, you don't hear about anything ecstatic statements like Subhani, glory be to me, or there's no one under this jubba but Allah. You don't find any of those things being said. You find those things in the time of Mansur al-Hallaj, or you find them in the times of other people. Now the ulama of Ihsan, what they said is when people make statements like this, it should be checked whether it's accidental or purposeful. If it's purposeful, they are excused at the time they are saying it.